I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Farm Chat. My name is Allison Swanson. I'm an instructor with North Central Iowa Ag in the Classroom. And today we are going to be taking you down to the state of Florida with our own farmer George, who has graciously agreed to show us a watermelon farm down in South Florida. So they have just started to plant little baby watermelon plants in this field that you can see behind George. And he's going to explain a little bit about how those plants are grown from a tiny little seed to the baby plant that they'll be putting into the soil today, and what it's going to look like when those watermelons are ready to be harvested. So a few housekeeping things before we get started is I have everybody muted, and we'll ask that you please stay muted throughout today's farm chat. If you would like to ask any questions for George, you can go ahead and type those in the chat box. I have a list of the questions that you, as a classroom, had come up with prior to today's farm chat that I'll keep track of and see if we can get all of those answered for you today. So without any ado, I will introduce George Sims, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and what we're going to be learning about today when it comes to watermelon. Off to you, George.
Okay, well, thanks, Allison. And I'm excited to be doing another farm chat for the students there in Iowa. I really enjoy sharing information with farmers, and now I'm getting a chance to share with all of you in the classroom. As Allison said, we did a farm chat last fall, did it from one of my citrus orchards, and it was so much fun that we wanted to do something different now. And I've actually grown watermelons myself now for almost 20 years. I'm actually at another farmer's friend of mine who's actually growing this watermelon crop, and I've worked with him for the last 14 years. I actually help him. I have a liquid carbon that we're able to put in with his baby transplants, and it really helps them to grow well. And of course, I've been coming to Iowa now for 4 years, and I love coming up to your great state and working with your corn and soybean farmers. And we like to share with all farmers anywhere. I didn't start out as a farmer. To give a little bit of background, I was born and raised in North Florida, very close to Alabama. And I went to school later, and like you, going through grade school and high school. And then I was able to go to college, and I actually went to college on a Navy scholarship. And after I got my degree in engineering from Auburn University, I actually flew Navy jets, and I was actually stationed on a couple of big aircraft carriers and went all around the world. And it's really hard for me to believe that that was 44 years ago that I was doing something that adventurous. But my life's been a lot of fun, and I'm keeping it fun. And I got back into agriculture in the middle of the 1980s. So about 36 years ago, I got back into farming, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm very passionate about helping farmers. And of course, down here in Florida, we grow a lot of oranges, and I know you've heard of that. And we also grow a lot of vegetable crops, which might be a surprise to you. In the winter, actually, the green beans that you might have had at Thanksgiving or Christmas were more than likely grown in Florida. We also grow a lot of strawberries, and any strawberries that you would be having right now probably have come from Florida. And then now we're planting watermelons, and our watermelons, we're at the farm. This is a working farm. You heard the tractor go by earlier, taking a tank of fertilizer over to where they're planting. But I'm out here. This is a 500-acre farm. And we're going to plant 1 million baby watermelon plants. Well, that is a really big number, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of people to be able to plant all of these watermelon plants. It's going to take us 2 to 3 weeks, and I'll show you how it works and how this all gets started. But first, I want to show you where we are in the state of Florida, and I have a map that I'll share with you. Okay, Now, this is, of course, the map of the United States of America. And you guys are right there in this green square, about the center, I think most of you, and that would be Iowa. And that is a great state. Now, I'm in this great state of Florida. Now, we are down in about the southern southwest corner of Florida. Now, to give you a correlation, as you can see, it's a long distance. You'd have to go across a lot of states to get from Iowa to Florida. So if you ran a car and you left this afternoon, you wouldn't get here until tomorrow night. And that is a long drive. It'd be about 24 hours to drive across all those states that you would have to drive across to get from Iowa all the way down here to South Florida where I am. But that's where we are today. And this is where we'll be planting these watermelon plants. Now, as I show you right here, this area is something you might know as that's where Disney World is and Universal Studios. That is approximately Orlando, Florida. We're about 2 hours in the car. We're down here. We're south of Orlando about 2 hours. So I wanted to give you an idea of where we are in the United States. Now, here's what I'm planting today. And I want to show you a baby watermelon plant. This plant has been grown in a nursery for about 6 weeks. Now, this plant actually started out, and I'll put it in my hand, is this tiny watermelon seed. That little seed turned into this plant in a greenhouse in about 6 weeks. So now we're going to take these baby plants, and I'm going to show you soon that we're going to go out in the field and watch them where they're planting these watermelon plants. Now, something that's unique that I want to show you and share with you about Iowa and Florida. In Iowa, you have this very dark, rich soil, which is wonderful for growing crops. We're not that blessed in Florida. This is our beach sand. And literally, we have to add a lot more of the nutrients to be able to grow in this type of soil. And you can see the difference in the color, where yours is much darker and richer. Your soil in Iowa has more organic matter, and our Florida soil is really just sand. So that gives you an idea of what it takes to be able to grow. And we're going to be planting these plants, and this operation has already started. And I think, let me show you how the plants get from the greenhouse here to the farm. So these watermelon plants are all stacked, and they've got this blue curtain here to help protect them from the sun while they're here on the trailer. It helps to keep them from drying out. We want to keep them moist and keep them ready to go into the soil. But as you can see, I'll go here and I'll take a plant out. And that's what's happening over on the trailer, is that these plants are coming out of these little trays, and the workers will be planting them. There's 162 plants in each one of these trays. And if I take this tray out, it's like the one we had on the back of the tailgate of the truck. There's 162 plants in that tray. And you can see there are, I don't even know how many thousands of plants are on this trailer today, but I would guess there's probably 50,000. That's what we plant typically in a day, is about 50,000 plants per day. Now, the difference here than what happens in Iowa, where you live, with planting corn and soybeans, that is all done with big, big tractors and big planters. The seed goes in the ground in your part of the world through a big planter. And that is totally different than what I'm going to show you here with what's going to happen with planting these baby watermelon plants. I'm walking over to the field where we'll see the planter here shortly, and the workers actually putting the plants in the ground. Now, there was a lot of work done before we got to this stage, before we're actually planting, just like with any farm. You get your land ready, you have to go out and do a lot of prep work so that you can be ready when it's time to plant. Now, we're now here in the middle of February, and we can start planting. You're probably going to be waiting another 1 to 2 months before you start planting in Iowa. And the reason is that it's 65 degrees here today. I would guess that's a lot warmer than it is in Iowa right now. And we actually were 85 degrees yesterday, but we had a little bit of rain last night and it actually cooled off a little. Now you actually see there's a little bit of water here at the end of the rows. This is the low end of the field. It doesn't have to go up very far into the field and then it dries out. So this water will evaporate with the sunshine and the wind, and it'll actually dry out over the next day or two. That doesn't affect the planting. And I'm getting to a drier area where I can show you how this works and what we're going to be planting on. And as I said earlier, this is an operating real life farm, and the workers are doing their work to support this. And as the planter's coming across the field, we're getting closer and closer to being able to show you the planting of these plants. Now, you might notice that out there in the field, we're not planting the plants directly into the soil. We're actually planting them onto this plastic. And here is some that actually have been planted. Here's a baby watermelon plant, one like we had in that tray. And this plastic is black. And the reason is that will absorb more heat. We're still a little cool at night here in Florida right now, but these watermelon plants will get some extra heating through the day. As the sun shines on this plastic, it will allow more heat to be given to the baby watermelon plants. Now, since this plastic would seal out the rain, we have to have a way to get water to these plants. So here at the end of the row, there is this black tube. Now this is like a water hose, and we will hook this up to our water line, and then we'll be able to actually water these plants underneath that plastic. And we can also inject our fertilizer that's necessary, the nutrients for the plants. We can inject that through this same hose that's underneath that black plastic. So as I was saying earlier, there's been a lot of work done out here in the field for several months. The farmer got the ground ready. They actually came out and laid this plastic and made these beds. These are called watermelon beds. We also do this for other vegetables here in Florida. Our tomatoes and our bell peppers and our strawberries are all planted on plastic like this. And the reason we do that is for weed control. We need to be able to have the weeds not grow, and we want our watermelon plants to grow in this field. Now, right here, you notice in the middle between the rows, this is a windbreak. We get a lot of wind here in Florida because it's pretty flat, and we're surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. And so we get a lot of wind off of the water, and this windbreak will grow up hopefully to 2 to 3 foot tall, and it will help break the wind. Because yesterday I was out here and we were doing a test run, and it was very dry, and the sand was blowing like we were in a desert. And it, thank goodness, it's not like that today. We've got a much nicer day today, and we're getting closer to the actual planter. And I'll move over so that we can get you up close so that you can see how these watermelon plants are being planted.
George, would it
Yep.
work? Would the plant grow if you actually put the seed and put like you would here in Iowa where we plant the seeds for corn and soybeans? If you were to plant watermelon seeds on this farm, would it actually grow, or do you have to have that nursery component to it?
No, the seed would grow. It would be
Okay.
like any seed. I mean, this is done in an effort to speed up the actual process of the planting and to give us a head start so that we know that we've got a better chance that these plants are going to make it because they already have a root system established. Okay, so here is the actual planting of watermelon plants. And the farmers are pretty ingenious on how they design their system, that they've got those trays on an angle and then they come down just by manual gravity. And when they get finished with all the plugs out of one tray, then another one will come right down. And then the extra helpers in back pick up the empty trays and take them back to a central area. But this system, we have two of these on this farm. And this is actually, they are going to plant about 25,000 of these baby watermelon plants. And I'll get over here a little closer so you can actually see how they're going in. Now on the front of the machine, there's a wheel that's actually punching the holes in the plastic. And then the worker is just putting the plant into the hole. Now, once this is done, this is the plants. These are the plants on this machine that are the seedless watermelons. This is what we're growing, is seedless watermelons here. Now, after these plants are planted, another crew will come back, and every 4 plants, they will plant a pollinator. We need a pollinator for the bees to be able to get to the male pollen to go to the female plants. That's the way this works. These plants would not grow very many watermelons if we did not put in a pollinator. These are not self-pollinating. They have to have a pollinator. And to equate that to like your corn, you know that when corn gets to a certain stage, it has its tassel. And of course, then it pollinates the ears of corn with the silks in a corn ear. So that is the same thing that nature does, is that we have to pollinate these watermelon plants, but we do that with another plant that will be planted every 4 plants in these rows. So
I'm
now
sure
that
some
they
of you
finished,
students, I'm sure some of these students have already studied about pollinators too. So thanks for touching on that.
sure. And I mean, that's what's so important in our entire world, is that we need to take care of our bees because they are our primary source of pollination in our fields and in our crops. And a lot of crops would not be able to pollinate. For instance, almond trees out in California cannot pollinate without bees. So they actually bring in bees from other states in the winter. Right now, they're in California pollinating the almond trees. So bees are our friends.
Yes.
So we will wind up, our goal is that we will have 2,400 of these baby watermelon plants per acre. And they will grow and produce our crop in about 3 months. So it's now the middle of February, so about the middle of May, and this is all timed for market for the reasons to have these watermelons for you guys by Memorial Day. That's our goal. These watermelons are primarily here in the spring grown to be ready by Memorial Day. So Allison, I'm going to go back over toward the truck. If you have questions, let me start working on the questions.
Sure. Let's see, we'll ask some questions about growing them, and then we'll talk a little bit about how they will be harvested in the middle of May that you were talking about.
Okay.
Let's see, can you get a double crop of watermelon, or do you only plant one crop per growing season?
Well, these plants that we're planting today, they will only grow one crop, but that one crop will actually be available over about 3 to 4 weeks. So we actually would be harvesting these plants, and they're called cuts, C-U-T-S, that we're cutting the watermelons by hand, and that will start in the middle of May, and it will go for probably 2 to 3 weeks. The plants will have multiple watermelons on them, and once these plants start growing, the vines can grow from that plant out 6 to 8 feet, and they will have multiple blooms on the plant, and that's where the watermelons form. And that's why we need the bees to be able to pollinate all of those baby watermelon plants. And as they come off the plant, as the plant grows, you can maybe understand that the first flower is going to produce the first melon. And then over the next few weeks, there'll be more flowers as this plant grows from that baby plant. It will grow, and then we will have multiple melons on that plant. Now, when they come to harvest it, we may only get 2 to 3 melons off of that plant that we could actually send to you in Iowa. They won't be big enough, the baby ones. And then in late May, early June, it starts getting very high temperatures here in Florida, and the melons actually would not produce to a point that they would be considered to be commercial melons. So let me grab the other prop here, and I'll show you what we're talking about. Okay, there it is. That is a representative melon. That is a seedless watermelon. This one was actually grown in Central America because I got it from the grocery store last night. But this melon weighs about 17 pounds. And so when we harvest these with the plants that we have out there planted, we're going to go from a baby seed to a baby transplant in the field and grow it into this watermelon here in Florida over the next 3 months. We plan on about 5,000 of these melons per acre. That's what we're going to harvest, is 5,000 of these melons over the next, once we start harvesting in May.
Wow. Are all watermelons green on the outside like that?
Yes, I don't think I've ever seen one. They have multiple stripes, and one of the ways that there's several ideas that I've learned over the years in growing melons to tell when a watermelon's ripe. The vine on this melon was actually connected right here. And in the field, the vine from that plant was connected, and that was basically the way the plant feeds this melon, and this melon is making sugar, and it grows from that. And when this stem is the melon's almost ready, the stem will break off very easily. And you also, these stripes, when this is a baby melon, it looks more totally green than it does to have stripes. And the stripes basically come as the melon grows and expands in size. And another feature that'll tell you when a watermelon's ripe is we call it the yellow belly. Once it has a yellow bottom, that is pretty much ripe. And so this is a ripe melon, and I would suspect that it would be very good. So that's maybe a few ideas on how to tell if a watermelon's ripe or not.
Okay, that was a question too, was how could you tell when a watermelon is ripe? So thank you. Let's see, I think we can get a math question out to the students and try to figure this out. You said you planted 2,400 watermelon plants per acre on this
Correct.
farm, right? So an acre, just for reference to remind some of you students, is 1 acre is equivalent to the size of one football field. So George said he is in a 500-acre field here. And so he's planting 2,400 plants per acre, and he has 500 acres. So how many plants will that be when they're done planting? Okay, let's see more about, oh, we got asked, can we grow watermelons in Iowa? And we can. And I think maybe some of you, we have gardens too that we've planted watermelons in, but our growing season, maybe you could touch on that a little bit, George, of it's not as long as Florida's growing season.
Sure. And of course, that comes back to our handy map of that. You can see that where we are in Florida all the way to Iowa, that is about 1,300 miles to drive it. And I would guess that that's a diagonal, but you are at least 1,000 miles north of where we are in Florida. So your latitude is going to be so much higher. And as you alluded to, Allison, the growing season is much shorter in Iowa. You're going to be planting corn and soybeans in about 2 months, maybe start in March, but you will definitely, hopefully, be planting in April. Whereas we have been planting crops here in Florida now we've planted strawberries during the winter. We planted bell peppers in January. Green beans are still being planted, and now watermelons are planted. But our watermelons are about a 90-day crop. It takes 90 days to grow it from this baby watermelon plant to get it to where it's producing our melons. That takes about 90 days. So we're starting right now to meet the market for having these melons ready for Memorial Day. So we could have planted them a little earlier, and some growers do, but traditionally the watermelons would be planted now, and then we'd start harvesting them in May. And that would be, you would have to wait longer in Iowa to actually get those plants to where your garden is going. I would guess maybe May, June, and then you could grow it through the summer. But your melons then wouldn't be ready until probably later in the summer or early fall.
Yep, that sounds about right. Okay, another question we have is, why are there two different colors of seeds in the watermelon? They're usually black ones and then white ones. Why is that?
Well, the black seed has been in there longer, and that is typically the product of a pollinated watermelon, whereas that's self-pollinated, the ones that I mentioned earlier, when you have the watermelons like the seeded, they have black seeds. A seedless melon typically has no seeds or white seeds. It's just a matter of the way they're bred and what we're after. And of course, for convenience, I guess the marketplace has determined they like the seedless melons. They don't like picking out the seeds. Typically, we don't eat the seeds. You can, it wouldn't hurt you. But I actually prefer to get a seeded melon, and in the center of the melon is called the heart, and the heart of the melon is the sweetest and much sweeter to me in a seeded melon than it is in a seedless melon. The seedless melon is for convenience, just not having to mess with the seeds. And then, of course, Some farms also grow some really tiny melons that, uh, gosh, they're smaller than a volleyball, and they're called personal watermelons. And they're convenient to put in your refrigerator because the big melon takes up a lot of space. And so, unless you cut it up into chunks and put it in a container, there's other ways to get your melon and have it in your refrigerator to be able to keep it and enjoy it. But the big
Yes.
melon is a 17-pound, you know, bigger
Mhm.
than a basketball.
Yeah. What's the size of the biggest watermelon that you've seen or farmed?
I have once growing up, there was a watermelon contest, and I saw a watermelon that was over 200 pounds. It was like a state record, but
I
it,
bet.
I mean, it was just too big. I mean, it was just so cumbersome. But typically, our melons, the seedless melons, are going to be about 15 to 18, maybe 20 pounds. The seeded melons are going to be about twice that size. They're going to be anywhere from 30 to 40 pounds.
A question about the plastic, the black plastic that is used to plant. Is that plastic going to be recycled after the growing season or just thrown away?
It has to be actually taken up for, agronomic reasons. We have to remove it each year after each crop, but it's pretty much decimated. It's destroyed in the process of getting it up. So we can't reuse it. Now, some farms will choose to grow another crop on it. It's called double cropping. And to do that, you have problems with plant diseases, and you also have problems with being able to get enough fertility. Watermelons take a lot of nutrients out of the ground, and historically, a farmer, if he has enough land, he would not replant watermelons on this ground for 5 to 8 years.
Okay. A question about water. Has this farm ever had trouble getting enough water or too much water where it's flooded?
Well, again, typically in Florida, we don't get very much rain in the winter. It's very unusual. So we typically are in a drier time until about June. So these watermelons would actually be finished before we would have issues with our summer rains. The one thing that's unique about Florida is that we get probably 50 to 60% of our annual rainfall all happens between June and September, and that's without a hurricane or a tropical storm. That's just thunderstorm activity. You literally, and joking, you can set your watch by the thunderstorms in the summer in Florida about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You typically are going to have a thunderstorm, and it's only going to last 15 minutes, half hour, or something like that. And you'll get a small amount of rain, or you might get 3 or 4 inches of rain, which I know in Iowa, that's a large amount of rain in one rain. That typically is, problematic up there in Iowa. But for us, it's as we noted earlier, when I showed you the sand, our sand allows that water to move on out of the sand, and it will go off into our creeks and rivers and then out into the Gulf of Mexico. Whereas in your ground is much heavier, as I showed. It's a lot richer and darker, but your ground holds water a lot better than our Florida sand. So it was all created in the right proportions, and so we have that sand down here. The reason is to get rid of all the water we get in the summer.
There you go. Do you have any animals or different kinds of pests that would come out and could potentially hurt the crop while it's growing?
Oh, we do. Our number one problem animal is the raccoons. Raccoons love watermelon. They really love watermelon. So raccoons are a problem, and deer can also be a problem. But the deer like to eat the vines. That's a kind of tasty food source for the deer. But the raccoons come out. They're after the melons. They don't eat the vines, but they'll eat the melons, and they do cause us some problems.
I bet. Let's talk about the workers there. How long have they already been there this morning working in the field, and how long will they stay today?
Well, they usually get here about daylight, and they about 6 in the morning or maybe a little earlier, and then they'll be here typically to probably mid afternoon. As it gets warmer and hotter, we try to get the plants in earlier in the day before the heat really gets on them. And then we've got them, we're watering them through that hose underneath the plastic. And so, we're trying to give those baby plants the best start. So as it warms up in Florida in the afternoons and we really get into some heat in a few weeks, that's when you would have to be careful about planting these baby plants. It typically would be done in the morning.
Okay. So when harvest rolls around in a few months, are all of these watermelons harvested by hand as well?
Yes, they are. They actually, a crew will go out through the field with machetes and they will cut the vines away from the melon. And then another crew will come back and actually pick up the melons and load them into, it'll be kind of funny for you guys. I wish I had a picture of one, but old school buses. And that's the primary way to get a watermelon from the field to the packing house where it's going to be washed and put into cartons and put on a truck to send to you guys to your grocery store in Iowa. But they take and cut out all the windows of the school bus, and it still has the door on it and the driver's seat, but they take out all the seats and they cut out all the windows of the school bus, and then basically the workers on the ground just throw them up to workers in the bus, and the bus worker inside catches it and then stacks them inside the school bus, and then they drive the bus to the packing house.
Okay, and that's where they get washed and ready to ship out to different stores across the state and the country, I assume.
Yes, we do. We send them all the way to New York. We send them all the way to Iowa. Typically, what happens, like most seasonal vegetables, our melons will be ready before the states north of us. Florida is so far south that our melons would be ready by Memorial Day. But most of the melons that, as you go further north, like the melons in Georgia, would probably be ready for July 4th. So we're timing these melons to meet the market needs.
That makes sense. Um, yep, there's a lot more that goes into planting and harvesting than sometimes we realize. Let's
Well,
see.
here it's significantly different because we have so much more manual labor that's needed. It's not mechanized. We don't mechanize the planting and we don't mechanize the harvesting. So that means you got to have a lot of workers. And I mean, we have to have hundreds and hundreds of workers when we start picking these melons. There'll be several hundred workers involved in the field harvesting. And then once it gets to the packing house where they're washed and then they're graded and they're sized and they're put into cartons that are on wooden pallets, and then those cartons of melons are then loaded into a semi truck, and then that's what goes. A refrigerated truck would deliver those melons to your grocery stores, in Iowa.
This is all fascinating, and everybody has asked such great questions during this farm chat. We weren't able to get through them all during this session. So this happened last time with the citrus farm chat. There was just so many questions. And so what I'll do, since we didn't get most of them answered, is I will take note of those questions that didn't get answered. I will email them to George, and I'm sure he would be happy to answer them, and we'll get those answers to your classroom so that you can kind of follow up with your classes about the whole watermelon planting process and see if all of your questions did get answered. But for time's sake, we better wrap up this morning's farm chat. So I just want to say thank you to George for taking time out of his busy day to show us the watermelon farm and how we're able to get our watermelon as early as Memorial Day here in Iowa. So thanks again, George. Thank you all for joining us today. And this was really fun. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. Y'all have a great day. Bye bye.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Now you can say bye. I got the mute off.
Oh. Have a good day. Bye.
You. Bye. Thank you.
You.